Hello, everyone. My name is Samia Ashraf. I'm a Google developer expert for Flutter and also a Women Tech Makers ambassador and also a Flutter enthusiast. So, today I want to talk about a very interesting topic, which is building full stack Flutter apps with Dart Frog. So, let me walk you through the table of content. So today we'll be starting with what is Dart Frog. I'm sure you'll be wondering what it is. And then we'll go on to some updates, discussing some updates, followed by how we can install Dart Frog and run from our uh, the code editor. And we will also see one live example. So to begin with, let me give you a quick introduction on what is Dart Frog. And before that, for whoever is new here and who does not know what Flutter is, so Flutter is a framework that is used to build apps for with which you can build apps for multiple platforms, including Android and iOS, Windows, Mac, Linux, uh, all with a single code base. And till now, we have been working with Flutter only on the front end. So we design using different widgets with different components, and the design is completely ready. So once the APIs are given to us from the backend team, we then go ahead and integrate that in our apps, right? So this is what we've been doing. Now, interestingly, Very Good Ventures has come up with the Dart Frog. So Dart Frog was solely created to build APIs, or rather backend, using Dart programming language. So Dart programming language is the same one that is used to build Flutter applications, which means that if you want to build APIs for the Flutter apps, you don't have to learn any new programming language. If you know Dart, then you can build APIs using Dart itself, using the Dart Frog framework. So, interestingly, that is why I can confidently say that we can build full stack Flutter applications using the Dart programming language. On front end, we're using the widgets using the Dart programming language. And on back end, just with the programming language Dart, you can build APIs and the back end. So, with that, let me give you a quick definition from the website itself. So it's a fast, simple framework to improve Dart on the back end, because we already use Dart on the front end, and till now there was till Dartfrog was introduced, there was no support for back end. So with Dartfrog, the simple framework, which is also very fast, you can improve the Dart on the back end as well and build full stack Flutter applications. So this was created to give more control to the developers in managing both front end and back end, which is very true, right? It's always a good thing if you have the full control of the application rather than depending on the back end for the back end of the application. So which means that you can now build the entire application on your own if you know Dart. And so yeah, so both front end and back end can now be coded in Dart, and you can build a complete Flutter full stack application, and mainly used to build APIs using the Dart Frog framework. So let me tell you a little bit on the CLI verbose mode. So hyphen verbose mode will now, when working with, so toggle the dash dash verbose mode when you're working with the Dart Frog CLI. So what happens here is, if you can see the image here, then you will notice that from the time you have run the command to the application being completely reloaded, this is a hot reload process, you can actually see the different process that happened between these two phases. From the beginning, from the time you entered the command to the time the application was actually reloaded, you will notice what are the different changes that are happening. So if you just use dart underscore frog dev, then it's going to build the server for you. But if you use the hyphen verbose mode, then that will tell you what are the different phases that happen before the application was reloaded, and which is very important when, especially when you're debugging the application, and if you want to know what is the what how it is working on the backend. So the verbose mode will be supported on build, create, and also the dev. When you're developing, also it will be supported, and also when you're creating a build. So yeah, if you want to know more on how the process is happening, just use the hyphen verbose mode, and you will know the working of this. So all of the commands we will be discussing it later. So let us now discuss some updates. So from the very first launch, there has been some updates. So one is the hot reload. We all know how important hot reload is, right? So when you're working on the code, and for some reason, if the working just broke because of some bug in the code, then you don't have to stop the entire application and run all over from the beginning. So we just do the hot reload, and from that very same state, the application will be reloaded. So this is also available on Dart Frog. You can um, use the hot reload mechanism to just reload the app instead of restarting the app. So this will also save us a lot of time because we are not stopping the server and then restarting it from the beginning. We are just reloading the server using the hot reload method. So this was one of the updates. And then some performance improvements, because the very first version, it was more like an experimental version also. So obviously there was a lot of improvements on the performance, stability improvements as well, especially on Windows. So we all know that lately most of the updates are done keeping the Windows, keeping the desktop platform in mind. So obviously, even the Dart Frog was improved so that it can be supported on the desktop as well. And error reporting improvements, also the verbose mode in which we can detect what is going on in the backend. Some logging improvements, again, the verbose that logs in every minor detail, route conflict detection, route, route detection, some error message formatting, and also resilience and recovery from errors. So, like I said, the first version was more of an experimental version. A lot of improvements were made, and all of these improvements were made to obviously improve the way Dart Frog works. So, now let us discuss how we can install the Dart Frog. So this is very simple, just like how you start a Flutter project from the Visual Studio or whichever code editor that you use. It is very much similar to that. So I am using Visual Studio Code, so I'll just tell you keeping that in context. So just like how we create a new Flutter project, we can start first. Before creating a Dart Frog project, you need to make sure that Dart Frog CLI is activated, because here you will not be using the command prompt to create a new project. Command prompt will not work for Dart Frog projects as of now. So it has to be done all through the terminal. First, in order to use the Dart Frog commands, we need to activate the Dart Frog CLI. CLI is command line interface. If you want to use Dart Frog in command line interface, you need to activate it. So yeah, in order to be able to execute Dart Frog commands, activate the Dart Frog CLI from the terminal. So this is the code for that. Dart pub global activate Dart Frog CLI. So next is, so what I like to do is Before I create the project, I enter into the directory using the cd command. And once I enter the directory, I then enter this command in the terminal, which is dot frog create and then the project name. So your project name can be different. And once you run this command, the a folder with all the dart frog initial files will be created in that particular folder which you have selected, or from where you have created the dart frog um, project. So just like that, here I'm using the dart frog command. So in order to use that dart frog command, this is very important. If you miss a step, then for sure you're going to get an error if you're using this as the first command, the create, because it will not recognize what is dart frog. So that is the reason I'm going to activate the dart frog CLI before I actually start using the dart frog commands. So just like that, with this command, you can create a project. So once the project is created, there will be initial files with some initial codes. So all of this we will view as a live example later on. But before that, I just want to explain the step by step. So if you want to see how the Dart Frog app, how it is running, then we need to start the server, the dev server um, for the development, which is again a Dart Frog command, which is Dart Frog dev. So since we are in the development server, we are going to say Dart Frog dev. Now what happens is this is going to give you a URL, a local URL, a local host URL where the Dart Frog project is running. And once you open this URL, you can then see all of how the Dart Frog app is running. So all of the changes can be viewed there. And once you're done with creating the project, once you're finished with the Dart Frog project, you can create a build using the Dart Frog build command. Again, it is a Dart Frog command. So Dart Frog build is going to create a production build for the backend, and this command is the one that is going to generate the build for the project. So once you have created a build, you would want to deploy this project. So at present, the Dart Frog server can only be deployed on Google Cloud Run, AWS App Runner, and DigitalOcean App Platform. So as of today, these are the three uh, supported things to deploy. But obviously, there's going to be a lot more improvements in future. But as of now, it is just three places where you can deploy your Dart Frog project. So next, let us discuss a new concept called dynamic routes. Now, dynamic routes are basically routes that will have a common message. So the way we create a dynamic route is we're going to write the name of the route and enclose it within square brackets and then call it .dart file. .dart is the extension. So what is that? What it does is this is going to create a route, and this route is going to have a common message. So again, an example of this we will be viewing it, but this is mainly created when you want to create routes with common messages on the screen, or routes that do common functionality. So I have a small example for dynamic routes here. Now we have on request um, a context, and then there is a string message. Now the name of my dynamic route file is message.dart enclosed within square brackets, and that exact message I am going to pass in the function, the on request function. And what I will do is I'm going to return a response whose body is going to contain you have reached the message. Now, when I'm browsing to the URL, this is the local URL where the particular Dart frog project is running, and I'm going to say /IWD23. So what it does is it's going to display you have reached IWD23. So if I change this to GDG MENA 23, it's going to then say you have reached GDG MENA 23. So which means you have reached here is a common link. So that's the reason if you're going to create multiple screens that where some portion of it is going to common and other portion depends on the message, then you can go ahead and use dynamic routes. And here message, which is also the file name, is nothing but a dynamic string that displays in the route and also which you can use to display in the body. So, so the final concept that we'll discuss is middleware. What is middleware? So middleware here is extremely important because this is what I can call as the brain of your Dart Frog project. Now, most of the things without a middleware is going to be somewhat constant. So we can display variables, but those variables will be constant or local to that particular file. But what if I want to create a variable in one file and access that variable from some other file? So this is going to require logic, right? So that logic we can introduce using the middleware. Now, middleware allows you to execute code before and or after a request is processed, which means that a portion of the code which exists in the middleware can be executed when a request is processed, before or after. That depends completely on the use case. And the way we introduce a middleware file is underscore middleware dot dart, where we have to make sure that every folder can have only one middleware. So if there is a folder called as routes that can have only one middleware and which will be global in that particular folder, there can be no other middleware. And inside the middleware, we can use different techniques to introduce logic. Provider is a type of middleware here, like for example, provider, that can create and provide an instance of type T to the request context. So middleware is nothing but something, a file is requesting something from the middleware. So middleware is then going to return the requested item to that particular file. Because remember when I said that if you want to access something from um, if you want to access something from file 1 but that exists in file 2, so that is how you can exchange the thing using the middleware. Again, we will see an example for this. So let me now take you to the VS Code and we can start with an example. So I said that first we need to activate the Dart Frog CLI, right? So for that, what I'm going to do is I have a fresh window here, a VS Code window, and I'm going to open the terminal. So in my terminal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste that command, which is dart pub global activate dart frog CLI, the same command that we discussed. This is used to activate the Dart Frog CLI. So once this is activated, so mine is already activated, so that's why it's giving the message. But if you haven't activated it, then it's going to give you a different message. So once the Dart Frog CLI is activated, let me now add the next command, which is Dart Frog create. And before that, I said that I like to navigate to the folder where I want the project to be. So let me just say CD, and this is where I want my project to be. So I'm going to navigate there, and then let's say dart frog create. So yeah, let me call it this name, dart frog create gdg mina underscore dart frog. So it's going to create and then install the dependencies. And now it's going to tell me that if you want to access, then enter, first of all, change the directory and then run dart underscore frog dev. Remember, I said that this is the command that is used to start the server. So before that, let me just open the project here. So I created it in Studio Books, and this one, gdg mina underscore dart frog. So once I have opened the project, let me start a terminal. And here I'm going to say dart frog dev. This is going to start the server for me. And it's telling me a message that it's running locally on HTTP localhost 8080. So let me go ahead and check if that is true. So yeah, that's true. So let me just again. So now it gives me a message, welcome to Dart Frog, which is exactly the message from here. So what happens is by default, when you open, so this is index.dart, right? So by default, when you open this URL, what happens is the body is going to return welcome to Dart Frog. So if you want to change this message, let's change it to gdg mina, and the hot reload works just like that. Go ahead and reload it, and it's going to say welcome to gdg mina. So just like that, you can change the um, body of the index.dart, and it's going to reflect the changes exactly like that. So this way you can start building the APIs on the back end. It's very simple, right? So now there are two more concepts, which is dynamic routes and middleware. Before going to middleware, let's discuss what is dynamic routes. So remember, I told you that dynamic routes is file name enclosed within square brackets. So let me say message enclosed in square brackets dot dart. And let me take the same body as this, as index.dart. The only difference is this is also going to have an extra parameter string message. And what is this message? This is nothing but the file name. So here, if I just say return the message or return the file name, then it's going to do just that. Let's go ahead and test that. So here I'm going to say gdg mina. So this is the endpoint. So it's going to print out exactly that. So what it is doing here is whatever I'm entering as the endpoint or the extension, it is taking that and returning just that. So this is how I said that you can, if you want to have a few things as common in one file, but one thing which is dynamic, then you can use the dynamic route. So we can also try it like this. So it is message is gdg mina. And if I change it, so if I, let's say gdg mina 23, then it's going to change. So notice that message is the common point here. And the only thing that's dynamic here is gdg mina 23 or gdg mina. So that is the only thing which is changing. So if in some use cases, like I said again, if one portion of it is common and only one part depends, which is dynamic, then you can go ahead and use the dynamic routes. So that was about dynamic routes. Lastly, let us discuss about middleware. So I told you that middleware is mainly like the brain of the project, right? So let's say I want to display a message here, something like this. So I want to say you have reached this message, this page one time. And I also want to, obviously, every time it's not going to be one time. So I want to introduce a variable called count. So now whenever I enter this page, it's going to tell me it's the index.dart that I changed. So I'm going to remove the um, dynamic route. So it's going to tell me here, you have reached this page one time. And if I change this to two times, again, it's going to tell me two times. But I'm actually visiting this page over and over, right? So technically it should increase and tell me that three times, four times, because I'm continuously revisiting the page. Now, that is not going to be possible just here. So what I want to do is I might need this count somewhere else also in the project. So I'm going to introduce a middleware for this particular folder. Remember, for every folder, there can only be one middleware, and I'm going to call it underscore middleware dot dart. This is the global middleware. Now here, what happens is, so let me just copy this import. Now, middleware is a function basically, which is going to take in a parameter called as handler and which is of the type handler. So this is the middleware function, which is taking in handler as one of the arguments. So this middleware is also going to return a handler. So obviously the return type becomes handler. Now what happens here is this is now I want in this middleware, I want to introduce the variable count. And this count should increase every time I visit the page. So it should have something which is auto incrementing it, right? Because I don't want to do it every time and then reload it. I want it to automatically increment. So I'm going to introduce a variable called int count and then assign it to 0. Then what I'm going to do is whenever this middleware is requested, it should return this count. So when it returns that count, I'm going to catch it in this variable and display it. So let's just put it all together and then I'll tell you how it works. So this one will be, I'm going to use the provider logic here. So handler dot use provider. Using the provider technique, I want to return an integer. And this integer is nothing but the count variable. And this count variable before returning has to be auto incremented. So once this is auto incremented, then it is going to be returned from wherever it was requested. So now here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say context dot read. So yeah, so this here in this middleware, I'm going to, so this count is the one that is going to be returned. And yeah, so context dot read of the type integer. Okay, so looks like we have an issue here. Let me just check it here. Um, guess I'm missing something. Just a second. So this is context dot read. I guess. So we have our middleware, which is dot use provider. So const. Okay, so I'm going to change this to final because we will not be changing anything from this screen. So the reason we were getting an error is because I had not mentioned it as constant final. So final because I'm not going to touch the count variable here at all. I'm not going to do anything with it. It will be, all of it is going to be done from here, auto incremented and then passed on. So now let us go ahead and check what is the scenario. So now it says you have reached this page one time, two times, three times. So now it is auto incrementing on its own, right? So even when I visit a dynamic route and still come back, it is going to hold that count variable. And this is all because of the middleware, because middleware here is responsible for handling the logic or acting as a brain for this project. So just like that, you can introduce different variables, introduce different logics, and connect all of them to build a complex application using the Dart Frog. I think this is an excellent option. And if you have never tried it, go ahead, give it a try. I think it's very powerful. And yeah, so with that, we have come to the end of the session. I hope you've learned something from it. So, yeah. Do we have any questions? Okay, I can see someone helping remove the const keyword. Yeah, you're right. Should have been final, but yeah. Any questions? So yeah, thank you for joining. I hope you have learned something about Dart Frog to give it a try. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any doubts. I'll do my best to guide you. Okay, no more questions. Some real examples of Dart Frog use. So you can use them to build APIs. So once you're done creating the front end, you can go ahead and create the APIs. So just like the ones that I said, you can use the dynamic routes, use the post get by ID request, and use the Dart programming language, and you can build APIs with that. Yeah, that is one of the uh, real-time examples of Dart Frog to build the APIs, basically the backend for the project. I hope that answered your question. And if you want me to create an entire series of API using the Dart from backend, I'm going to try my best and have another session included for that because that's a very wide topic and we can cover it there in some time next. Yeah, no problem. Any more questions? So thank you everyone for joining and hope to see you again.